But what about the United States? Although this quote is from a president that was in office way after the time period I've been mentioning up until now, I think it does a good job of explaining what it is that's distinct, what it is that is unique about motorsport and automotive manufacturing in the United States. So let you take a look at this quote, and what do they mean? Tell me, what do they mean by spirit? What is the American spirit? As I've mentioned, the origins of automotive technology and motorsport are very much tied to Western Europe. However, soon after, you started to see the United States becoming a bigger player in automotive manufacturing, but also motorsport. Early race venues in the United States were very similar to their European counterparts. A lot of point-to-point events, which you would have races from one city to the next, held on public roads. Oftentimes hill climbs were also used. So hill climbs, essentially the car to get up to the top of the hill, the fastest one. But what's, as I mentioned beforehand, there's something unique about U.S. Americans. And one thing is, we like going fast. We like finishing first. We like having the best of something. And so land speed records became something that was very much of focus here. And so these were various forms, whether it be flying starts or the measured mile, as far as how to record the fastest car speed ever at that time. Keep in mind, cars were something quite rare, and so that was something that generated a lot of buzz. That was wow. And so when you had a land speed record, people were reading that newspaper that was publishing it. People were interested in that car that went that fast and that manufacturer who produced it. And so you could see how the land speed records really started to grow over time. Oftentimes these land speed records were held in very flat surfaces, obviously to maximize the speed that a car could go. And so that's where we see beach racing, the origins of that, but also dry lake seabeds, frozen water, anything which you could get a very, very flat, smooth surface. But if you think about constructors of race cars, constructors of these cars that we see dominating early motorsport, weren't really American. Why? Well, if you think about U.S. Americans, not only do we like going fast, but we also like selling a whole lot of product. So in the United States, because we had a growing population, but we also had innovators in automotive manufacturing that were more concerned about making cars for a large audience, mass producing amounts of cars that then could be consumed by a massive amount of people. You started to see more of this focus in on just let's build a ton of cars that are reliable. Whereas the European were the ones that would be more likely to develop the very high-priced, luxury, high-performance vehicles that would also, of course, win a lot in these motorsport competitions at the time. So we can see how these early these traits are very much tied to, I would argue, the culture that is distinctively U.S. American. The first official and organized motorsport event to occur in North America was the 1895 Thanksgiving Day race in Chicago. This race was organized by Chicago Times-Herald publisher H.H. Colston. So once again, you can see how the wow factor of automobile racing was used to promote media, in this case, a guy's newspaper company. At the time, this newspaper company was competing head-to-head with several others in Chicago, and so it was all about increasing awareness, increasing the exposure of that particular newspaper to more and more audiences that were moving as more and more people moved to Chicago. This initial race was originally scheduled for Labor Day, but finally ended up on Thanksgiving Day in Chicago. If you know anything about weather during that time period there, it can be brutal. And so 10 to 12 inches of snow fell that day, and so although there was 90-plus entrants, gas and electric varieties, only 11 could even make it there, and then only 6 started. But the winner of the competition were the Durieux brothers, 2 individuals I noted on a previous slide, that won the race that started in Jackson Park, just south of Chicago, went up to Waukegan, and then came back down to Jackson Park. So once again, a point-to-point race that we see here in North America. And this was also at a time which the car was not something widely seen. Keep in mind, the automobile was something we see more there in Western Europe. And so at the time, it was kind of hard to even promote this race because people never even seen cars, or at the time what they referred to as the horseless carriage. Examples of sites for land speed records in the United States here very early on in the 20th century is the Ormond and Daytona Beach there in Florida in the early 1900s. So this beach here, which we can see, if you know anything about Daytona Beach, you can actually drive your vehicle out onto the beach. It's distinctive, its geology, it's very, very flat, very smooth, and because of the composition of sand and shells and various sediments, it's very hard packed. So it's a lot like a road that we would see today. At the time, it was very hard to find a long, flat, smooth surface to do these land speed conquests, or these land speed records. So you needed, something that would have no bumps, surface that was very, very ideal. And so in the wintertime, they would attract northerners to vacation down here over time, but it was all about promoting the advantages of various automotive technologies, whether it be engines that are gasoline powered or steam powered or electric. So this was once again all about innovation. So these land speed records, I would argue, is something you're going to find more of being of interest here in the United States. It's all about going the fastest. In U.S. history class, you would have learned about the westward migration of individuals from the East Coast, particularly there by New York and Boston, to the Midwest, to the Great Plains, and then further out to the west later on. Key to understanding that migration routes were the role of mountains. People would have to, when they would migrate, they'd have to go around mountains. They'd have to find ways, because you couldn't get your horse and buggy up and over a mountain. And so the whole idea of building a road, but then also a automobile that could then go up to the peak and of course come back down, was absolutely critical. It was something that was like, wow, that is cool. And so here we see one of the first ever hill climb races in North America, the Climb to the Clouds, or the Mount Washington Hill Climb that occurred in 1904. This yellow line is the Mount Washington Auto Road. And so this here was a major wow factor at the time. This was something that when they built this road, they were so proud of it. They referred to this sucker as being one of the marvels of man. How could man make a road that could take you to the top of a mountain? Add to that the automotive technologies that then propelled a vehicle to go up this road, up to the top of the summit, then became a race. And so this early race, you can kind of understand why hill climbs had a little bit more significance historically than they might today. Our next key historical motorsport event is the Vanderbilt Cup, which was held from 1904 to 1910. And it was the first annual race held in the United States. It was not organized this time by a newspaper individual. Instead, it was organized by a very wealthy railroad heir or descendant, William K. Vanderbilt. So if you hear the name Vanderbilt in the United States, it's probably a family of wealth. And so it's kind of interesting. Why would someone who's going to inherit a lot of money in railroad invest in something that's going to probably lead to the demise of the railroad? Automobiles. It's quite simple. He was just trying to catch the next wave. He was trying to make some money. He really wanted to promote motorsport, but also automotive manufacturing in the United States. And so for Vanderbilt, it was very much a U.S.-focused event. It was all about enticing and increasing the development of automotive manufacturers domestically. Who sanctioned this initial event? Of course, AAA. AAA was the main sanctioner of national level events at this time. However, one of the drawbacks of this Vanderbilt Cup, which oftentimes, for the most part, was held on public roads, was the fact that a lot of people died. A lot of spectator deaths, even the participants. And so many, very early on in the United States, were questioning if motorsport is even relevant. Should motorsport even happen? And so we saw, something we still see today. People that should ban motorsport. Well, people have been wanting to ban motorsport for a long, long time. Here we see the actual Vanderbilt Cup, and so the prize that you would be awarded if you won the particular event. But let's look at a quote from William K. Vanderbilt that I really think showcases his interest in developing automotive technologies, automotive manufacturing in the United States, utilizing motorsport. But like I mentioned, in the Vanderbilt Cups, there were oftentimes casualties. And these casualties, as they're publicized in news, more and more people become, wait a minute, I'm reading about these people dying just by going to an event. maybe we shouldn't have these. Maybe they should be banned. And so here we can see an article written in the New York Times back in 1906 about a Vanderbilt Cup in which a spectator died. So it's interesting that motorsport over time was promoted and expanded due to media, but it also over time led to more and more people wanting to ban the sport, as more and more people could read about people dying from just simply going and spectating in an event. You can then see the sentiment start to build, noted with this article title on the left and this cartoon on the right. On the left, both of these are from Motor Age, which at the time was a very widely circulated publication that covered, at the time, automotive manufacturing, which was pretty much the only one. So this was, at the time, a publication that people were wanting to view, people were reading, and so you can understand why and how the sentiment grew for banning motorsport at the time in the United States.